Okay, I am recording. Hello. It's an exciting uh, day or evening, I should say, because we are gonna read the next book of the Kyoshi series, which is they said gonna be the last book. So this is what the book looks like. It's a beautiful. Look at it. So nice. Look at that. Look at that shit. It's great. So it is, right? And we get to see Rangi there too, which is nice that they have like some concept art of her. Sadly, there's no other art like in the back. Um, but I will read the back of the of the um of the book. It has like an excerpt of the book, and I already read it, and it sounds like Kyoshi has gotten a lot stronger. So I will read. Will now read the thing. All right. Bolstered by more than 2 dozen men, Mock turned calmer. Well, girl, what is it you want? Checking in on your elders. I want you to surrender your weapons, vacate the premises, and march yourselves to a magistrate's courthouse for judgment. The nearest one is 7 blocks from here. Several of the hatchet men burst out laughing. The corner of Mock's mouth turned upward. Kyoshi might be the Avatar, but she was vastly outnumbered and trapped in an enclosed space. We refuse, he said with an exaggerated roll of his hand. All right then. In that case, I only have one question. Kyoshi cast her gaze around the room. Are you sure this is all of you? The tribe members glanced at each other. Mock's face swelled with rage, reddening like a berry in the sun. It wasn't insolence so much as pragmatism, her instinct for tidiness and efficiency rising to the surface. If not, I can wait until everyone arrives, Kyoshi said. I don't want to have to go back to check each floor. Tear her apart, Mock screamed. The hatchet men charged from all directions. Kyoshi drew one of her fans. 2 would have been a bit much. So there's an excerpt of that. So excited to read that part once we get there. And then I'll read the side thing that it gives us. From the books. I don't know, book language, I guess from the corner? Well, when you open the book, and then there's the little thing. Because this has a sleeve, so the inside sleeve. There we go. Alright. The epic conclusion to the legendary story of Avatar Kyoshi. Kyoshi's place as the true Avatar has been finally cemented, but at a heavy cost. With her mentors gone, Kyoshi struggles to keep the peace in a world full of corruption and violence. But while her reputation grows, a mysterious threat emerges from the spirit world. Man. I feel like, yeah, yo. Yeah, I bet I know who that is too, because I had my thoughts. Kyoshi's travels take her to the Fire Nation, where she reunites with Rangi and becomes the Fire Lord's guest of honor for an important cultural holiday. But beneath the celebration lies a dangerous game of court politics, and when the palace itself is attacked, she, Rangi, and her allies must deliver justice before the Fire Nation is consumed by strife. This thrilling follow-up to the New York Times bestseller Avatar: The Last Airbender, The Rise of Kyoshi Kyoshi's journey, from a girl of humble origins to the merciless pursuer of justice, still feared and admired centuries after becoming the Avatar. So yeah, I am very excited to read this. And the actual hardcover, the last hardcover, The Rise of Kyoshi, it was black. It was like a black hardcover with well, I'll just show you this one. I think it's really cool what they did. So, and then the Kyoshi, the text part, and the other is like a gold kind of color. Which for the first one they did black with gold, and then inside the cover, like the back of the like the book back. I don't know how to say it, but like once you open like to the first page, it's like black. But for the first one, the outside was black and then the gold writing, and then the inside was red. And they did the reverse on this one, which I think is pretty cool. So I applaud people for that. Okay. And this book is actually 100 pages less than the first book. So that's good. That's good for me. Yeah, there's that. Okay, hold on just 1 second. I need to do something quick. There we go. Put this back to there. Okay. Let me just get some. There we go. Okay, you guys. I think for the first Kyoshi book, it took me like about 30 minutes just to read it because I was fangirling over KORRA. And now, right now, it's taken me like 8-9 minutes. And you guys, I am pretty proud of myself for that. Okay. Let me move this over here. Alright. So, this is Avatar the Last Airbender. The Shadow of Kyoshi. And then I think there's a little bit at the... Yeah, there we go. A message from the author. So I tell the story a lot at panels and interviews, but I want to preserve it for prosperity here. During a time when I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, and before I had ever written a novel, I thought about becoming a TV writer. To become a TV writer, you have to demonstrate your skills by writing a spec script, an episode of a currently running show, essentially fan fiction. I had just watched Book 2, Earth, of the original ATLA, or Avatar the Last Airbender. So I wrote a spec script where Sokka feels bad about not being a bender and finds a cool master to train him. In my spec script, he was going to learn to fight with Wing Chun and gadgetry. In retrospect, the result would have been a lot like Asami. From these creative beginnings, I would never have dreamed that in the future I'd be establishing canon for the Avatar world. In the truest sense, I have you, the fans, to thank for this opportunity. You've kept your love for this universe burning brightly for more than a decade, and the most I could ever hope for as a fellow fan and author is to add to your enjoyment. These books are dedicated to you. Thank you all so much. Sincerely, FC Yee. Yeah. Fucking I've I've heard spoiler free a lot of good things about, like, a lot of exciting things happening in this book. Though I have learned some not so, well, some disappointing rather things, but I guess maybe that would have been too long. This story deal does not go where into the Chin the Conqueror. I read that and she does not. Yeah. And then I think I also read that the book doesn't go over how or when she creates the Daily, which would have been cool too. It would have been awesome. But that's okay too. But I've heard that this story has a lot of lore on other avatars. Like, just like a lot of lore. And I'm just like, man, I am so excited. Alright. So we will go with the prologue. So, prologue. And I'm just skimming it now, and oof. I see our villain right here, right now. Pretty sure. Okay. So, prologue. Boy! Yoon clawed at his own neck until he drew blood. The feeling of slime and teeth lingered on his skin. Boy, stop your sniveling! He remembered Jianzu lighting the incense. He remembered the sticky sweet smell and the deadness it created in his limbs. Sting jelly venom, his training told him. He'd only just started his doses with Sifu Amak. Yoon blinked and tried to make sense of his surroundings. His hands clawed into wet, porous moss that, when it should have been the dust of the mining town underneath his fingernails. He was in a mangrove forest. The sky was the color of acid. He crawled around, the juices of the swamp sucking at his knees. The trunks of the leafless trees twisted and gnarled as high as hills, barely lighter in color than silhouettes. Screened by the now loose. Why do I say now? Screened by the loose weaves of branches, a great glowing eye started at him. It was the eye that had spoken, the eye that told him that he wasn't a pain, terrible and familiar, racked his stomach and folded him in two. His forearm splashed into the swamp water. The landscape around him began to shake, not from earthbending, but from somewhere rawer. I'm not trying to say rar. Rar, more raw. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, the landscape around him began to shake, not from earthbending, but from something rawer and more uncontrollable. He wasn't. End of sentence. He was nothing. The shallow water danced, raindrops on a drum, spiking in geysers. The shoreline swayed, rattled the trees, bucking and clashing them together like the antlers of beasts locked in combat. Yoon dashed his head against the ground in a frenzied corruption of a student bowing to their master. Sorry. Alright. Yoon dashed his head against the ground in a frenzied corruption of a student bowing to their master. Chiansu. His entire mind was a screamed name, a single screeching tone on a broken flute. His skull thudded against the brackish mud. Jiansu. Stop it, you miserable little brat, the eye roared. Despite its anger, it shrank back from him, afraid of his throes of agony. The ground squeezed and fluttered, the heartbeat of a man falling to his death, pounding louder and louder before the final impact. Yoon wanted it to stop. He wanted the anguish to end. It hurt so much to see everything he'd worked for shredded to sparks and dust. It was destroying him from the inside out. It was destroying him from the inside. So let it out. So let it out. The whisper came to him in his own voice, not the eyes, not Jiansu's. Put the pain outside. Put it somewhere else. On someone else. The rip started at his feet. A pinprick of overstretched... the rip started at his feet. A pinprick in overstretched silk. A tear birthed itself in the water and raced into the banks of the earth. Sorry. The tear birthed itself into the water and raced into the banks of the earth like lightning cracking the sky. The ground split apart, releasing all its quaking tension from one swift cataclysmic burst, and then stillness. Yoon could breathe again. He could see. The trembling had worn itself out, spent its energy in the creation of a long lesion in the ground, an unnatural wound upon the landscape. Swamp water poured into the injury, masking a depth he knew he couldn't explore. Things were so much clearer when there was relief. Yoon used this moment to respite. Yoon used this moment of respite to look around. The musty grove resembled no forest he'd ever seen. The dim light in the sky came from no discernible sun. This place was a hazy reflection of a real landscape, painted with ink that had been thinned too much. I'm in the spirit world. He backed away from the ravine that lay before him, not wanting to be dragged in by the force of its water flow. Turning around, he pulled himself to drier footing, using the exposed roots of a leathery tree. The air smelled like sulfur and rot. Master Kelsing had told him about the spirit world. It was supposed to be a beautiful, wild place, full of creatures. Oh. Are you okay? I heard a noise. Do you want me to wait until your internet comes back? Or are you good? Oh, okay. Do you need me to read something? Did you miss a part, or were you good? Oh shit. Okay. That's cool. Alright, I'll read that again. There we go. Yeah. Yoon wanted it to stop. He wanted the anguish to hurt. He wanted the anguish to end. It hurt so much to see everything he'd worked to see everything he'd worked for shredded to sparks and dust. It was destroying him from the inside. So let it out. The whisper came to him from in his own voice. Not the eyes, not Jianzu's. Put the pain outside. Put it somewhere else. On someone else. The rip started at his feet, a pinprick in overstretched silk. The tear birthed itself in the water and raced into the banks of the earth like lightning cracking the sky. The ground split apart, releasing all its quaking tension in one swift cataclysmic burst, and then stillness. Yoon could breathe again. He could see. The trembling had worn itself out, spent its energy in the creation of a long lesion in the ground, and a natural wound upon the landscape. Swamp water poured into the injury. Swamp water poured into the injury, masking a depth he knew he shouldn't explore. Things were so much clearer when there was relief. Yoon used this moment of respite. Yoon used this moment of respite to look around. The musty grove resembled no forest he'd ever seen. The dim light in the sky came from no discernible sun. This place was a hazy reflection of a real landscape, painted with ink that had been thinned too much. I'm in the spirit world. He backed away from the ravine that lay before him, not wanting to be dragged in by the force of the water's flow. Turning around, he pulled himself to drier footing using the exposed roots of a leathery tree. The air smelled like sulfur and rot. Master Kelsing told him about the spirit world. It was supposed to be a beautiful, wild place, full of creatures beyond imagining. The realm of the spirits was a mirror held up to its visitors, a reflection of your emotions, a reality that shaped around your own spirit's intangible projection. Yoon flexed his fingers. Hold on, just 1 second. I gotta put more of my lotion. There we go. Ah, yes, there we go. Stuff is wonders. Okay. There we go. Yoon flexed his fingers, finding them as solid as they could be. He wondered if a gentle monk had ever explored a nightmarish bog like this one. They'd never talked about what happened if you entered the spirit world while you were still in your body. Yeah, they never talked about what happened if you entered the spirit world while you were still in your body. The rustle of branches gave him a start and reminded him he wasn't alone. The eye. It watched carefully from the darkness of the forest, circling him on translucent appendages studded with what he knew to be human teeth. He felt He'd felt its bite back in the mountains when it had sampled his blood. A pulsating panic rushed through the chambers of his heart. Yoon knew he was on borrowed time. He tried to remember what Jianzu had called the spirit. Father Glowworm? The eye suddenly rushed closer, socketing itself in the gap between two nearby trees. Yoon shrieked and fell backward on his elbows. He'd made a mistake. A crucial, invisible barrier had been broken by saying the name aloud, and now he was more connected and vulnerable to it than ever. I call myself that, the spirit said. Father Glowworm's pupil darted around unnervingly, the iris squeezing narrower. Its gaze had left. Its gaze had a heft of a probing tongue. Now, child, I believe you owe me your name. Like a fool, Yoon had fallen into the role of the bumpkin of cautionary Earth Kingdom folk tales. The poor field hand or woodcutter who fell under a curse or was simply eaten. He could only think of how he'd be consumed, rasped into pulp, maybe, or absorbed into the slime. My name is Yoon. His palms were slick with fear. In some of those tales, the stupid boy arrived through sheer pluck. Yoon was already prey. His only chance was to become interesting prey. I. His poise was failing him. His slickness under pressure that had impressed the Fire Lord and the Earth King, the chieftains of the Water Tribe, and the head abbots of the Air Temples alike, was nowhere to be found. Maybe Avatar Yoon had the confidence to talk his way out of this, but no such person existed anymore. Father Glowworm shifted in the trees, and Yoon knew he was going to die if he didn't say something quick. His mind leaped back to the moments in his past when his fate was cradled in someone else's hands. I wish to submit myself for consideration as your student, he yelled. Was there a way for a single eye to look surprised? The forest was silent except for the rush of falling water. I kneel before you as a humble spiritual traveler, seeking answers, Yoon said. He shifted around so his posture matched his words. Please teach me the ways of the spirit world. I beseech you. Father Glowworm burst into laughter. It had no lids to narrow, but its sphere tilted upward in the universal direction of amusement. Boy, do you think this is a game? Everything is a game, Yoon thought, trying to still his shaking. I will draw this one out as far as I can. I will survive a turn longer. There was no more Avatar Yoon. He would have to be Yoon the Swindler again. I can hardly be faulted for wanting to ask questions from a spirit wiser than the best of humanity. When in doubt, flatter the mark. The Earth Kingdom's finest sages couldn't identify the Avatar for 16 years, and yet you did it in a matter of seconds. Oh, that was not... I was reading it in the Eye's voice, what I would think the Eye's voice said. Let me do that again. I can hardly be faulted for wanting to ask questions of a spirit wiser than the best of humanity. When in doubt, flatter the mark. The Earth Kingdom's finest sages couldn't identify the Avatar for 16 years, and yet you did it in a matter of seconds. You don't mind the kind of battle KORRA and I did and not be able to recognize your opponent's spirit. I could already feel Jianzhu bringing his reincarnation closer to one of my tunnels. It had to be one of you children. Yoon's ears perked at the word tunnels. You have roots to the You have roots to the human world? More than one? Father Glowworm laughed again. I know what you're doing, it sneered. And it doesn't impress me. Yes, I can create passages to the human realm. No, you will not trick or convince me into sending you back. You're not the bridge between spirits and humans, boy. You're the stone that needed to be pitched away by the sculptor. The impurity in the ore. I've tasted your blood and you're nothing. You're not even worth this conversation. The eye crept closer. I can tell how upset you are by the truth. It said in a soothing, sweet tone. Let me say that again. The eye crept closer. I can tell how upset you are by the truth. Yeah, I can tell how upset you are by the truth. It said in a soothing, sweet tone. Don't be. Who needs avatarhood? You'll find your own use and your own immortality. Once I strengthen myself on your blood, part of your existence will exist within me, forever. The problem with any game was that eventually the opponent decided to stop playing. Father Glowworm suddenly rushed you, spiraling through the forest, tendrils of slime grasping and parting the trees like the beads of a curtain. Now be grateful, the spirit roared, for we are about to become one. And that is the end of that prologue. I'm telling you, I knew it. Yoon was gonna be the bad guy. And Yoon became the bad guy. Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. But conscious enough to go and kill Jianzhu. I'll be right back. I just need to get some. Okay. I put lotion on my flaring up hand, but as another precaution, because my hands are still really warm, I have got my little baggie of ice water. That's the sound it's making. You can't hear it, Chandler. But they can hear it. It's just sloshing noises. Okay. Because it fully didn't fully freeze, even though it was there for like 5 hours. Okay. Maybe because it has like a pantyhose cover to it. Probably why. Okay. But we will go on to the next chapter, and that is called Unfinished Business. First, let me see how much I want to read today. Unless this chapter is super long. This chapter is fairly long. I might just read this chapter. I'll see how I'm feeling. Okay. The next chapter is called Unfinished Business. I love water. Okay. Unfinished Business. Brother Po once told Kuji the nickname for the Tao sword was all men's courage. Hold the sturdy chopping blade that let you hack away at a foe with abandon, and you'd feel braver immediately. Kuji did not feel braver as he gripped the haft. Oh, why did it do that? Oh, there we go. Hold the sturdy chopping blade that let you hack away at a foe with abandon, and you'd feel braver immediately. Kyoshi did not feel braver as he gripped the haft of his dao with clammy hands and watched the door. And his blade did not feel very sturdy. It was a rusted, chipped specimen that seemed like it would shatter if he waved it in the air too vigorously. As the most junior member of the triad of the Golden Wing, he'd had to wait at the back of the line as weapons were passed out in turn. This sword had come from the bottom of the crate. Now you're a real soldier, huh? Someone had joked at the time. Not like the rest of us hatchetmen. Brother Poe stood by the doorway, holding a small axe, the favored weapon of most of the triad's seasoned fighters. He looked calm on the outside, but Kuji could see him throat bobbing up and down repeatedly. But Kuji could see his throat bobbing up and down repeatedly as he swallowed. The same way it did when he was going for a big money play in Pai Sho. If Kuji had confidence in anything for protection, it was his gang's turf. Long Cow City Block. Long Cow City Block was practically a fortress. On the surface, Long Cow looked no different than its neighboring districts of Ba Sing Se's lower ring. The visible portion of the back The visible portion of the back rose a haphazard couple stories into the air like a budding mushroom, in defiance of gravity and solid architecture. But it was an open secret that the complex extended ill. Yeah, but it was an open secret that the complex extended illegally into the ground layer by layer, far below the surface. Each level had been dug out below the previous one, without a solid plan or understanding of safety, shored up by using only improvised supports of wood scrap, mud bricks, bits of rusty scavenged metal. And yet, Long Cow held solid without caving in. Possibly, possibly with the aid of the spirits. The inside of the block, the inside of the block was a knot of twists and turns, staircases and empty shafts, hives of squalid, hives of squalid apartments squeezed. Yeah, hives of squalid. Sorry, I'm getting distracted because my just feels so hot. My hand. 2020 is so not going to be my year if bumps start to appear on the palms of my hands. That I can assure you guys. Excuse me. Okay. Yeah, hives of squalid apartments squeeze the available pathways into narrow choke point, into narrow choke points. Long Cow was littered with natural traps, like the room where Kyoshi and Po waited. Uh, which was one of the reasons why lawmen never went inside the city block. Until now, the boss had gotten a tip that the Golden Wings stronghold was going to be hit this very day. Every brother was to take up positions until the threat was gone. Kyoshi didn't know what kind of enemy could get his elder so riled up. By his guess, it would have taken more lawmen than the lower ring possessed in order to lay siege on Lung Kao. Regardless, the plan was sound. Anyone trying to make it to the lower floors could Anyone trying to make it to the lower floors would have to file through a narrow bottleneck that ran by his room. Kuji and Ning could get the drop in. Kuji and Ning could get the drop on an intruder. 2-1. Sorry, I just felt my phone. Crap. Where's my phone? I felt it on this side. Oh, it's right here. All right. Alright. Yeah, Kuji and Ning could get the drop on an intruder. 2-1. And it was unlikely they'd see action. Kushi reminded himself. The level above was being prowled by throat cutter Gong, the boss's best assassin. Gong could stalk and kill a mongoose lizard in its own jungle lair. The number of heads he'd taken could have filled a hay barn. Crash came from one. The crash came from one floor up. There was no sound of a voice accompanying it. The little apartment began to feel less their turf to hold on, and more a box confining them like animals in a crate. Poe gestured with his hatchet. "We'll hear them coming down the stairs," he whispered. "That's when we strike." Kyoshi tilted his ear in that direction. He was so desperate to hear any approaching signal that he lost his balance and stumbled. Poe rolled his eyes. "Too loud," he hissed. As if to prove his point, someone flew through the doorway, snapping the hinges, and collided with Kuji. He shrieked and flailed with his dao, but at best managed to smack the person in the head with his pommel. Poe grabbed the attacker and raised his hatchet to strike, but checked his swing at the last second. It was throat cutter gone, unconscious and bleeding. His wrists bent the wrong way, and his ankles were bound by his own garrote wire. "Brother gone!" Poe shouted, forgetting his own lesson in stealth. "What happened?" Sorry, I wasn't paying attention, but now I'm rereading it. From the opposites. From the opposite side, from the wall opposite the hallway they were supposed to be focusing on, a pair of gauntleted. Okay. Yeah, from the wall opposite the hallway they were supposed to be focusing on, a pair of gauntleted arms burst through the brick. They wrapped around Poe's neck from behind in a chokehold, cutting off his words. Kyoshi saw his elder's eyes go white with terror before Poe was pulled out of the room straight through the wall. Kyoshi stared at the emptiness in stupefied with disbelief. Poe was a big man, and in a blink he had been taken like a raven eagle's prey. The hole he disappeared through revealed only darkness. Sorry, I'm reading but not paying attention. Yeah, the hole he disappeared through revealed only darkness. Outside, the floorboards creaked from the weight of a person walking, as if complete silence wore a cloak the enemy could wear and discard at will. The treading of heavy boots came closer and closer. Hold on just a second. Where was I? Sorry. Yeah, the treading of heavy boots came closer and closer. The The doorway filled, blacking out the faint light from the hall, and a tall, incredibly tall figure stepped inside. My girl Kyoshi, probably! My girl Kyoshi, probably! My Gurk? My Gurk? Too late, we already caught that. It's for the world to see now. Your mistake. Edit that out. No. No. I'm not going to. It's funny. Besides, never listen to me. Joy. It just says joy. Oh man, you had to edit that too. Man, so much editing here. You should be my editor. Nah, I'm too lazy for that. Besides, it just makes things more exciting. My Gurk. It's funny. Yeah, but you don't have time to edit any of my videos, so... Plus, I didn't hire you. You'd probably cost a lot of money. One day. Not today. But one day. Okay. Alrighty. Now, we'll get back to it. Okay. The doorway filled, blacking out the faint light from the hall. A tall, incredibly tall figure stepped inside. A thin line of blood trickled from its throat, as if it had been beheaded and glued back together. A dress of green silk billowed underneath the wound, its face a white mask, and its eyes were monstrous streaks of red. Trembling, Kyoshi raised his blade. He moved so slowly it felt like he was swimming through mud. The creature watched him swing his sword, its eyes on the metal, and somehow he knew it was fully capable of putting a stop to the action, if it cared to. The edge of the dao bit to his opponent's shoulder. Yeah, the edge of the dao bit into his opponent's shoulder. There was a snapping noise, and a sudden pain lashed his cheek. The sword had broken, the top half bouncing back in Kyoshi's face. It was a spirit. It had to be. It was a spirit that could pass through walls, a ghost that could float over floors, a beast impervious to blades. Kyoshi dropped the handle of the useless sword. His mother had told him once that invoking the Avatar could safeguard him from evil. He had known as a child she was making up stories, but that didn't mean he couldn't decide to believe them right now. Right now, he believed harder than he believed anything in his life. The Avatar protects me, he whispered while he could still speak. He fell on his behind and scrambled to the corner of the room. Blanketed completely by the spirit's long shadow. Yang Chen, protect me! The spirit woman followed him and lowered her red and white face to his. A human would have passed some kind of judgment on Kuji as he cowered like this. The cold disregard in her eyes was worse than any pity or sadistic amusement. Yeah, the cold disregard. Yeah, the cold disregard in her eyes was worse than any pity or sadistic amusement. Yang Chen isn't here right now, she said in a rich, commanding voice that would have been beautiful had she not held such clear indifference for his life. I am. Kyoshi sobbed as a large, powerful hand gripped him by the chin with thumb and forefinger. It was gentle, but gave the assurance that she could rip his jaw clean off his head if she so desired. The woman tilted her face upward. Now tell me where I can find your boss. Kyoshi's neck itched terribly. Man, I feel that, but on my hands. Yeah, Kyoshi's neck itched terribly. The Garo... yeah, I think it's Garo. Garot? It's spelled... Garot? Jarot? Jarot? Garot. Ah, I see. Garot. Okay, thank you. Kyoshi's neck itched terribly. The garrote had been coated in ground. The garrote had been coated in ground glass, and though she'd managed to avoid getting cut too deeply, sharp little fragments still vexed her skin. It served her right for being so sloppy. The gang's wireman had been stealthy, but not at the level of the company she used in her Dao Fei days. Speaking of which, she'd taken a risk by not incapacitating the boy like she'd done his elders. But he'd reminded her of LoK, of course. The way his stupid baby face tried to manage itself in a mask of hardness. His obvious need for approval of his sworn elder brothers. His sheer idiotic behavior. He was too young to be running with a gang in the slums of Ba Sing Se. No more exceptions for today, she told herself as she stepped over rusting junk and debris. She was still in the habit of labeling anyone roughly her age as boys and girls, and the language made her inclined towards softness, which was dangerous. Certainly, no one would show Kyoshi grace because she was only nearing 18. The Avatar did not have the luxury of being a child. She pushed through the hallway, barely wider than she was. Only the slightest cracks of illumination came through the walls. Glowing crystals were expensive, and candles were a fire risk, making light a premium in Long Cow. Networks of pipes stripped over her, pattering on the gilded headdress she wore, despite the cramped environment. She'd learned to account for the height it added, and having to stoop had been a fact for her life since childhood. The smell of human density wafted through the corridors, a concoction of sweat and drying paint. She could only imagine what the lower levels offered the nose. The city block packed more people into its limits than any other lower ring, and not all of its residents were criminals. Long Cow was a haven for the very poor. People with nowhere else to go squatting here and applied their industries, eking out livings as garbage pickers, fell off the wagon marketeers, unlicensed doctors, dodgy vendors, and the like. They were ordinary. The Earth Kingdom citizens trying to get by on the margins of the law. Her folk, essentially. The shadowed, the shadowed confines of the city block were also home to more violent sort. Oh, excuse me. Yeah, the shadowed confines of the city block were also home to a more violent sort, evolving gangs in the lower ring whose memberships were swelling. Whose memberships were swelling from the influx of Dao Fei. Bandits who could no longer hold territory in the countryside were fleeing for the cover of Bossing Se and other large cities. Blending in with the populace, hiding among the same refugee-seeking citizens they brutalized in years past. Those were not Kyoshi's folk. In fact, many of them were running from her, but given it was just as likely for an apartment, to be holding sacred residents who had nothing to do with her quarry, Kyoshi was keeping her movements in check. Garden variety earthbending that ripped up huge chunks of the surroundings would cause a dangerous collapse and harm innocents. The interior opened into a small market area. She passed a room full of barrels leaking bright ink over the floor. A home dyeing operation, and an empty butcher stall clouded with buzzing. Let me say that again. Sorry, I'm also holding the ice water baggie, so I'm trying to pull my fingers off because they hurt. Okay. In fact, many of them were running from her, but given it was just as likely for an apartment to be holding sacred residents who had nothing to do with her quarry, Kyoshi was keeping her movements in check. Garden variety earthbending that ripped up huge chunks of the surroundings would cause a dangerous collapse and harm innocents. The interior opened into a small market area. She passed a room full of barrels leaking bright ink over the floor. A home dyeing operation, and an empty butcher stall clouded with buzzing ant flies. Jianzu's study had contained his notes on the political and economic situation of Bossing Se, and the small reference to the city block noted how enterprising its residents were. Curiously, it also mentioned that the land it was built on held some value due to its prominent location in the lower ring. Merchants in the middle ring had tried to purchase the block in the past and evict the residents, but the dangers of the gangs had always made such projects fail. Kyoshi paused near a vat of spoiled mango pomade. Hold on. Where's my one? There we go. Um, yeah. Kyoshi paused near a vat of spoiled mango pumice. This was her spot. She bent an assortment of rock debris into a small circle and stood on it. She crossed her arms over her chest to make the smallest cross section possible. Before she went, though, she noticed a tiny object in the corner. It was a toy, a doll made of rags scavenged from a fine lady's dress. Someone in the block had gone through great effort to sew a doll made of fabric from the upper ring for their child. Hold on just 1 second. Sorry, I just gotta put lotion on my hands. Man, did I ever tell you guys how much eczema sucks? Because that sucks. It sucks a lot. Having your hands be so warm is not a vibe. Not a vibe at all. When they're warm and itchy, and like when you feel on your finger, you can feel your heartbeat. Okay. Alrighty. Okay. Okay. Yeah, someone in the block had gone through great effort to sew a doll made from fabric from the upper ring for their child. Kyoshi stared at it until she blinked, remembering why she was here. She stamped down with her foot. Her little platform of earth, held together by her bending, turned as hard as the point of an auger. Another word. Auger. No. Auger. Okay. Yeah, her little platform of earth, held together by her bending, turned as hard as the point of an auger. It burst through the clay tiles and rotting struts of wood, dropping her fast enough to make her guts lurch. She plunged through the floor and into the next level down, before doing it again and again. Jianzu's tactical manuals noted that in enclosed fights, most casualties happened at doorways and stairs. Kyoshi had decided to skip over those parts of the building and bore her own passage. She counted 14 stories, more than she'd estimated, until she came crashing through the ceiling of a room that was solid earth underneath, the bottom of Long Cow. Kyoshi stepped off her platform, dust and crumbs of masonry cascading off her arms, and looked around. There were no walls in here, only supporting columns that propped up the great height of the levels above. So the city block has a ballroom, she thought wryly. The empty expanse was similar to the entertainment halls. The empty expanse was similar to the entertainment halls of wealthy nobles like Liu Beifong. There was a space like this in the Avatar's mansion in Lyoka. She could see all the way to the far end, since the walls held lumps of glowing crystal, as if the light for the entire building had been hoarded for this room. There was a desk, a wooden island in the emptiness, and behind the desk was a man who hadn't given up his pretensions since Kyoshi had last seen him. "Hello, Uncle Mock," Kyoshi said. "It's been a while, hasn't it?" Mock, the former second in command in the Yolonek Dao Fei, goggled his eyes in surprise. Kyoshi was like a curse he couldn't shake. "You!" he fumed, shrinking slightly behind the furniture as if it could protect him. "What are you doing here?" "I heard rumors about a new boss settling into Long Cow, and thought he sounded very familiar. So I came to investigate. I heard this group is calling itself a triangle now. Do I have that right? Something with 3 sides." Kyoshi found it hard to keep track. The Dao Fei who were tumbling into the cities brought their grandio customs of secrecy and tradition into the realm of urban petty crimes. "The Triad of the Golden Wing!" he yelled, infuriated by her disinterest in his rituals. But Kyoshi was long past caring about the feelings of men like Mock. He could throw whatever tantrum he desired. The drumming of feet grew louder. The men Kyoshi had bypassed on the middle floors came filling into the room, surrounding her. They brandished axes, cleavers, and daggers. Mock's men had preferred outlandish weapons when they still roamed the countryside, but here in the city, they'd abandoned the 9-ring swords, the meteor hammers, for simpler arms that could be hidden in a crowd. There we go. Here's the part in the back of the book. Bolstered by more than 24 men, Mock turned calmer. "Well, girl, what is it you want, besides checking in on your elders?" "I want you to surrender your weapons, vacate the premises, and march yourself to a magistrate's courthouse for judgment. The nearest one is 7 blocks from here." Several of the hatchet men burst out laughing. The corner of Mock's mouth turned upward. Kyoshi might be the Avatar, but she was vastly outnumbered and trapped in an enclosed space. "We refuse," he said with an exaggerated roll of his hand. "All right, then. In that case, I only have one question for you." Kyoshi cast her gaze around the room. "Are you sure this is all of you?" The triad members glanced at each other. Mock's face swelled with rage, reddening like a berry in the sun. It wasn't insolence so much as pragmatism, her instinct for tidiness and efficiency rising to the surface. "If not, I can wait until everyone arrives," Kyoshi said. "I don't want to have to go back and check each floor." "Tear her apart!" Mock screamed. The hatchet men charged from all directions. Kyoshi drew one of her fans. Two would have been a bit much. Kyoshi stepped over the groaning bodies. When one of the triad members was too still, she nudged him with her boot until she saw signs of breathing. Mock's robe had blown off in the scuffle. He managed to bulge the chair he was sitting on a few inches in flight before Kyoshi put her hand on his shoulder, pressing him back to his seat. "No need to get up yet, Uncle," she said. Past enmity. Enmity? I feel like that's a really weird word to say. Enmity. Okay. Past enmity. Past enmity or not, he was still older than her. Mock rolled with an anger and fear that Kyoshi could feel through her grip. "So you're gonna murder me in cold blood like you did Ju? May you be ripped apart by thunderbolts and many knives just for slaying your sworn brothers?" "Yeah, may you be ripped apart by thunderbolts and many knives for slaying your sworn brothers." Kyoshi found herself bothered, more than she should have been, by Mock calling her a murderer. She and Ju Ping An had agreed to a duel, and the man immediately tried to kill her. Once she gained the upper hand, she had given him a chance to yield. The former leader of the Yellownecks had amply demonstrated he was beyond saving. And yet, during sleepless nights, she thought about Ju. The vile man infected her thoughts when she could have been dreaming of those she loved. She thought about Ju a great deal, his weight on her hands, and how, at the end of their fight, she'd decided. Kyoshi cleared her head. "Anything goes on the lei tai," she said. Justifying the act out loud was bitter, ineffective medicine that she'd forced herself to swallow anyway. "I'm not going to kill you. You and your men got a foothold inside the walls rather quickly for a gang of countryside bandits who spent most of their history bullying farmers. You have a contact in Ba Sing Se helping you, and I want to know who it is." Mock stiffened with purpose. True Dao Fei never surrendered information to the authorities, even if it would benefit them. "The day I squeal to you, girl, is the day I..." Kyoshi reminded him that times had changed since they first met, with a crushing squeeze of her fingers. She dented the nerves on his arms until the terms of their new relationship sunk in. It was someone from the middle ring, Mock said once he stopped squealing in pain. We used to go betweens. I don't know their name. Kyoshi let go and took a step back. She'd been expecting him to name a lower ring criminal, a local who'd maybe sworn brotherhood to him in the past. The middle ring was the domain of merchants and academics. Something didn't add up here. Mock clutched his shoulder and scrambled away from the desk. Why? He shouted at the door behind him. Now! In her distraction, Kyoshi had forgotten the third leading brother of the former Yellowknives. The door burst open in an ambush before Kyoshi could react. Brother Y sprung out, knife raised, a snarl on his lips. He wasn't wearing the leather strap that covered his severed nose, and without it, sorry, hold on. I feel like I'm putting so much fucking lotion on my fingers. You'll have to bear with me for like a couple seconds. Okay. Yeah, Brother Y sprang out, knife raised, a snarl on his lips. He wasn't wearing the leather strap that covered his severed nose, and without it, his gaunt face had a skull-like appearance. Y had been a fast, vicious man back in his Yellowneck days, and he still was. But when he saw the intruder was Kyoshi, dressed in her full makeup and regalia, he gasped and nearly halted in midair. Why, one of the few witnesses who'd seen her in the Avatar state, and the experience had. Why was the one of the few witnesses who'd seen her in the Avatar state, and the experience had overawed his spirit, and the experience had overawed the spiritual man. He stepped back to give her space, nearly knocking his brother over in his haste, dropping to his knees. The knife of the knife that had been aimed at Kyoshi a second before, he placed at her feet like an offering. Oh, come on! Mock screamed as Y bowed his head to the ground and prostrated himself before the Avatar. Kyoshi stepped out of the city block into the street. The day had gotten brighter and hotter. A squad of peace officers, uniformed guardsmen of Ba Sing Se, waited for her. That was funny, because he knows not to fuck with her. Yeah. God, I hope my fingers don't flare up all night today. All night tonight. That would really suck. It's like I feel. Maybe it's just me normally getting the shivers, but I feel like whenever I have my flare ups where my hands are like really hot, it feels like I get shivers like everywhere else. Like all of my heat, well, not all of it, but most of my heat is just going directly to my fingers and to my hands. I'm just like, this isn't cool. It's not. Actually, let me do something real quick. There we go. Yeah. Man. I'm like not stressing out either, so I don't know why my eczema is flaring up. Okay. Sorry, I'm just trying to calm my fucking hands. Okay. Sorry, I'm just like really trying to focus, but my hands feel like they're burning. Anything that is like slightly less warm makes me feel so nice. And both of my hands feel really hot right now. I wish it was like on my arm or somewhere, not like on my hands. Okay. After this chapter, I think I'm gonna read another chapter, but it depends. If it hits 10, no, I don't think I'm gonna read. I think I'm just gonna finish this one. Actually, you know what? I'm very indecisive right now. We'll see how long it takes me to finish this chapter, which is not that long. But with how my hands are feeling, it really sucks. Okay. Yeah, Kyoshi stepped out of the city block into the street. The day had gotten brighter and hotter. A squad of peace officers, uniformed guardsmen of the Bossing Se, waited for her, lining in wings to the left and right of the exit. The junior men, who'd never seen the Avatar before, stared at Kyoshi as she emerged from the darkness. One of them dropped his truncheon and fumbled to pick it up. Kyoshi walked past the rank-and-file guardsmen, ignoring the whispers and barely acknowledging the bows, until she reached Captain Lee by the door. He was a sallow-faced man who'd been on the job too long. His retirement delayed by gambling debts. "The cordon is set," he said to Kyoshi in a pipe smoker's wheeze. "No trouble out here so far." It was the lower ring citizen. Most of the lower ring citizens went about their business, ignoring the presence of the law. But Kyoshi noticed a few people watching with fake disinterest, probably spotters for other unsavory organizations. Working with Captain Lee meant flirting with a violation of Kyoshi's Daofei oaths. She'd sworn to her elder sister Karima under a blade held by her elder brother Wong, never to become a lackey of the law. But Lee had been her tool, her informant, not the other way around. He had provided her the intelligence she needed to close her unfinished business with Mark, and numbers for cleanup when she was done. "Is the building safe?" Lee asked, tilting his cap to dab at his forehead with his cuff. "The triad members are down and ready to be extricated," Kyoshi said. "You should summon a doctor." I'll get right on that, Lee said in a dull tone that let Kyoshi know how seriously he took the suggestion. He put his fingers to his lips and whistled. "All right, boys! Get the vermin out of there!" The guardsmen hustled into the city block, free to move fast after Kyoshi had swept the twists and nooks of danger. She waited patiently to see the results of her work. The triad of the Golden Wing needed to be counted and catalogued in the light of day. Being hauled away like dried goods would cause their mystique to blow away in the wind. Hopefully. She heard loud noises and the sound of a struggle emerging from the darkness of Long Cow. Two officers dragged out a man who hadn't been among the triads who'd attacked her. He was dressed poorly, but a pair of glasses fell. He was dressed poorly, but a pair of glasses fell from his head. He had to have been a jeweler or a tailor to have invested in such an he had to have been a jeweler or a tailor to have invested in such an inexpensive device. A boot crushed the glass. A boot crushed the glasses into the dust before she could say it. Before she could say anything. With mounting horror, Kyoshi watched another set of officers come out, hustling a woman by the back of her neck. She held a wailing child in her arms. The man with bad vision heard the cries and began thrashing harder from the guard's grasp. These weren't triad members. They were one of the poor families who lived in the city block. "What are your men doing?" Kyoshi shouted at Lee. Lee looked confused at her question. "Getting rid of the bad element. Certain folks have been waiting to demolish this eyesore for a long time." He turned hesitant, a haggler afraid to part with too much of his money. "Do you want to cut? If you do, you have to talk to my man in the middle ring." The middle ring. In a flash, she understood. Someone with big, lucrative plans for Long Cow wanted the residents scrubbed from the city block, and needed an excuse to do it. They let the triads in first to get the law and the Avatar involved, and then bribed Captain Lee to clear out innocent and criminal folk alike. "Stop this!" Kyoshi said. "Stop this right now!" Lee lamented without a speck of sincerity. "I'm sorry, Avatar, but I'm acting within the confines of my duty. Rightfully, I can vacate these premises of criminals as necessary." "Mama!" It was the little girl sobbing that set Kyoshi over the edge. "Papa!" Kyoshi drew her fans and snapped them open. She raised clumps of earth from below the dusty top layer, where the clay was still moist and malleable. Fist-sized clods shot forth, slamming over the mouths and noses of Lee and his officers, clamping over their skin like muzzles. The guards let go of the family and clawed at their faces, but Kyoshi's earthbending was too strong to be resisted. Lee sank to his knees, his eyes goggling. Oh, fuck. They had time before they would suffocate to death. Kyoshi put back her fans and slowly went to each guard in turn, yanking off their headbands one by one, checking the square metal seals of the Earth King's Kyoshi put back her fans and slowly went to each guard in turn. Hell yeah, get him, Kyoshi. Yeah, she is merciless. Yeah, Kyoshi put back her fans and slowly went to each guard in turn, yanking off their headbands one by one, checking the square metal seals of the Earth King fastened to the cloth. The badges of every official in Ba Sing Se had identification numbers engraved on them, a testament to the city's massive bureaucracy. These men, despite the shrinking supply of air to their brains, could understand the gesture of her taking their headbands and tucking them into her robes for safekeeping. One visit to an administration hall, and she could learn their identities. She could find them later. Most residents of Ba Sing Se had heard the rumors. They'd heard stories of what Avatar Kyoshi was and what she did to people. Kyoshi saved Lee for last. He'd turned purple at the time she'd taken to make the rounds. After snatching his headband from under his cap, she let the clave fall from his mouth, and the others at the same time. Lee's squad dropped to the ground, gasping for breath. The captain landed on his side, and his inhalation rattled like dice in a cup. She leaned over, and before she could say anything, Lou threw a name at her, hoping to buy clemency. He really had no backbone. His name is Woe. The man paying me is Minister Woe. Kyoshi needed to shut her eyes so her frustration wouldn't leak out. There were probably a dozen Minister Woes in Boston Say. The name alone was meaningless to her. The city was too big. The Earth Kingdom was too big. She couldn't keep up with the corruption leaking from its holes. She gathered her breath. Here is what's going to happen, Captain, she said as calmly as she could. You are going to clear the block of the triads and no one else. Then you are going to find paper and brush. You will write me a full confession detailing this Woe person and every bribe you took from him. Every stroke of it the truth. Do you hear me, Captain Lee? I will check. I want you to pour your very spirit into this confession. He nodded. Kyoshi straightened up to see the woman, her daughter, looking at her with wide, frightened eyes. She started to approach them, wanting to ask if they were hurt. Justice! Justice! Don't touch them! The man who'd lost his glasses threw himself between Kyoshi and his family. With his near-blindedness, he wouldn't have seen her trying to help. Or maybe he had, and decided she was a danger to his wife and child anyway. Farther away from the edges of the cordon, more bystanders gathered. They whispered to each other. The seeds of fresh rumors taking root in the soil. The Avatar had not only ripped apart the occupants of Long Cow, but she turned her insatiable wrath upon the officers of the Earth King's justice as well. The stares of the ordinary citizens and the terrified family made Kyoshi's skin prickle with a feeling that corrupt men like Lee or Mock could never force on her. Shame. Shame for what she'd done. Shame for what she was. Her makeup covered the flesh in her cheeks and camouflaged the furrow in her brow. She gave Lee one last meaningful tap and then walked away from Long Cow as slowly as she had arrived. As an impassive statue heading back to the altar that gave it life. But really, underneath her paint, she was feeling the scene of her crime, her heart threatening to pound her chest into dust. And that is the end of that chapter, and I think I will read the next chapter. They don't know justice. They don't know justice. Okay, I'm gonna take this time. I'll be right back. I need to get some more ice for my ice now is water. So it'll take me about like, I'm gonna say 4 or 5 minutes. Yeah, it's all melted now. Okay. I will mute this. Okay. Yeah, I'll be back. Give me like 3 minutes. So that way, you know, I want to skip 3 minutes ahead. I am back, guys. I just need to put my pantyhose slipper on my bag of ice again. So I don't want to hold anything too cold, which is cold enough. Okay. Alright. So now we will head on to the next page. The next chapter. Alright. The next chapter. Yeah, the next chapter is called The Invitation. The Invitation. People who complained about how long it took to travel across Ba Sing Se were usually factoring in the congestion. That wasn't a problem for Kyoshi. Crowds tended to be part Crowds tended to part out of her like grass before the breeze. She had another shortcut to exploit as well. It was possible to waterbend a makeshift raft upstream along the drainage canals, running up the upper ring all the way out to the agrarian zone for irrigation. It was extremely fast, if you could stand the smell. She reached the middle ring by the evening. Despite the orderly layout and numbered addresses, she struggled to find her direction in the uniformity of the white painted houses and green tiled roofs. She took paths leading her over peaceful bridges that spanned gently flowing. Yeah, she took paths leading her over peaceful bridges that. Yeah, sorry about that loud noise. Made me startled. Yeah, she took paths leading her over peaceful bridges that span gently flowing canals and along tea shops redolent with jasmine blossoms and trees standing their pale pink petals over the sidewalks. As a child living in the gutters of Yokia, Kyoshi used to imagine the paradise. Kyoshi used to imagine a paradise much like the middle ring, clean, quiet, and food at hand anywhere you looked. Store owners sweeping their floors could look up in surprise at her. Store owners sweeping their floors would look up in surprise at her, but soon return to their business. She passed a gaggle of dark-robed students that stared and elbowed each other to get a glimpse, but didn't flee her gaze. People who were comfortable with their station in life tended to have less fear. They couldn't imagine danger in any form visiting their doorstep. Kyoshi whipped out Kyoshi slipped out of sight into a darkened side street. She opened an unmarked door with a key she kept in her stash. The hallway she entered was as full of twists and stairs as Long Cow, but much cleaner. It ended in a passageway into a second. It ended with a passageway into a plain second-story apartment, furnished only with a bed and a desk. This room was one of several properties around the four nations that Jianzu had bequeathed her, and it served as a safe room where she could sleep overnight when she didn't want to announce her official presence with the Earth King staff. She unbuckled her bracers and peeled them off, tossing them on the bed as she crossed the floor. She sank into the chair and dumped the pilfered headbands on the desk. The badges clattered over the surface like gambling winnings. Alright. What was that? Yeah, she sank into the chair and dumped the pilfered headbands on the desk, the badges clattering over the surface like gambling winnings. She was more careful removing her headdress. A breeze rustled her freed hair, coming from the window that gave her an expansive sunset view of the lower ring in all its vastness and poverty. The brown shacks and shanties stretching over the land like leather drying like leather drying in the sun. It was an unusual layout for an apartment. Many medieval ring houses did not have views that faced the lower ring. The merchants and financiers who lived in this district paid so they didn't have to look at unpleasantly. Uh, Hold on. Yeah, the merchants and financiers. Yeah, the merchants and financiers who lived in this district paid so they didn't have to look at unpleasantness. Her fingers moved on their own, organizing the badges into neat stacks. A dull ache of exhaustion settled into her head. Today had added another compilation to the pile. She would need to plan another visit to Long Cow to make sure the residents were safe within their homes. And she'd have to follow up with Lee's information, or else the captain and his backers would know they could simply wait until the Avatar had passed like a cloud overhead for them to resume their corrupt activities. She knew it was a losing battle. In the grand scheme of things, singling out one dirty lawman and bossing Say had would have as much effect as pulling a raindrop out of the ocean. Unless she made an example of Lee and whoever bribed him. She could hurt them so badly that would spread about what happens when the Avatar catches you exploiting the defenseless for your own gain. It would be quick. It would be efficient. It would be brutal. Jianzu would have approved. Kyoshi slammed her hands against the desk, toppling the badges. She'd slipped yet again into the mindset of her deceased benefactor. She'd heard his words in his own voice. She'd heard his words in her own voice. The two of them speaking with as much unity as the avatars were supposed to be able to do in their past lives. She opened a drawer and pulled out a hand towel. Yeah, she opened a drawer and pulled out a hand towel that had been resting in a small bowl of special liniment. Kyoshi dragged the moistened cloth down hard. Kyoshi dragged the moistened cloth hard down the side of her face, trying to wipe away the deeper stains along her makeup. A shudder of revulsion ran up Kyoshi's back when she thought of how she'd smothered Lee with the exact same technique Jianzu had once used on her. She would have abhorred it, knowing exactly what it felt like to die slowly as your lungs caved in on themselves. In dealing with Lee, she'd slipped as easily as Jianzu. In dealing with Lee, she'd slipped as easily into Jianzu's skin as she had her clothes. The ones that had also been a gift from him. She slammed her fist on the desk again and heard part of the joinery crack. It felt like every step she took as the Avatar was in the wrong direction. Kelsang would have never entertained violence as policy. He would have worked to improve the fortunes of the Long Cow and Lower Ring residents, so they could push so they could push back against triad domination and middle ring exploitation. He would have acted as their voice. That was what Kyoshi. Oh shit. Oh no, my thing is gonna die. Hold on. Don't die. No. Yes, this is my backup server. In case my internet is shitty. Okay, there we go. Oh, that was a close one. Where did I put that? Oh, there it is. There we go. Man, that scared me. There we go. Yeah. That was what Kyoshi had to do. Let me go back a bit. He would have worked to improve the fortunes of the Long Cow and the lower residents, so they could push back against triad domination and middle ring exploitation. He would have acted as their voice. That was what Kyoshi had to do. In essence, it was what Kelsang had done for her, the abandoned child he found in Yokuya. It was the right course of action and would be the most effective in the long run. It would just take time. A very, very long time. A knock came from outside. "Come in," she said. A young man wearing the billowing orange and yellow robes of the air nomad opened the door. "Are you alright, Avatar Kyoshi?" "Yeah, are you alright, Avatar Kyoshi?" Monk Jinpa said. "I heard a loud noise and A stack of letters he was holding went flying into the air. Kyoshi whipped her hand around and around in a circle of airbending, corralling the papers with a miniature tornado. Jinpa recovered from his surprise and caught the pile of letters from the bottom of the vortex up, recreating a stack, but with the corners sticking out at all angles. "Apologies, Avatar," he said when he'd secured her correspondence once more. "I was surprised by your He gestured at his own face in lieu of pointing rudely at hers. She hadn't finished wiping off the rest of her makeup. She probably looked like a doctor's illustration of a skull with the skin halfway stripped. Kyoshi grabbed a towel to finish the job. "Don't worry about it," she said as she worked the cloth along the corner of her eye, taking care not to get the compound that would dissolve the paint into it. In defiance of her order, Jinpa still looked worried. "You're also bleeding from your neck." Yes, right." With her free hand, she opened a fan and aimed a leaf at the Jarot. Right? It was Jarot? Yeah, Jarot. hard, Garrett? But I heard on my phone it was, unless I'm wrong. Hold on. Garrot. Oh. Okay. Garrot. Okay. Sorry, I'm here. Hold on just 1 second. I just need to do something real quick. I put ice in my little baggie, and I tried to get all the air out, but I didn't get all the air out, and now it's bothering me. Because I can't get the full effect of the ice. So I'm going to try and just squeeze the ice out. Okay. That should do it. Feels like there's not that much air in there. Okay. There we go, back to the story. Alright. Yeah, in defiance of her order, Jinpa still looked worried. You're also bleeding from your neck. Yes, right. With her free hand, she opened a fan and aimed the leaf at the garrote wound with her throat. The shards of the glass from her skin plucked themselves out under the force of her earthbending, and balled into a floating clump that dropped into the floor when she switched her focus to a nearby pitcher. A tiny wriggle of water snaked out of the vessel and wrapped itself around Kyoshi's neck. It was cool and soothing against the itch of the wound, and she could feel her skin knitting together. Jinpa watched her heal herself, both worried and horrified by the crudeness of her self-administered first aid. Isn't healing water supposed to glow? He asked. I've never managed it. The mansion's libraries in Yokia were full of expensive tomes about the medical uses of waterbending, but Kyoshi lacked time and the proper teacher. She'd read through as many of the texts as she could anyway, and the wounds she'd been accumulated as the Avatar gave her plenty of opportunities to heal herself gave her plenty of opportunities to practice on herself. She'd made a vow. No matter how limited her knowledge was, or how flawed her technique, she would never again watch someone she cared about slip away from. Yeah, no matter how limited her knowledge was, or how flawed her technique, she would never again watch someone she cared about slip away in front of her while she did nothing. She tossed the water back in the picture and ran a finger over the marks left behind on her neck. At this rate, I'm going to look like Auntie Mui's latest patchwork quilt. She could hide the scar with more makeup and a higher collar, but the mottled, healed burns on her hands, courtesy of Zhu Ping'an, reminded her she was running out of body parts to injure and cover up. What are the updates? Jinpo took a seat and pulled out one of the many letters addressed to the Avatar that he'd already broken the seals on. He was allowed the privilege. During her first visit to the Southern Air Temple as the Avatar, he had helped her constantly with planning and communication, to the point where his elders shrugged and officially assigned him to Kyoshi as her secretary. Without his assistance, she would have been overwhelmed to the point of shutting down. Governor Ted humbly submits a report that Zegon Village has surpassed its former peak population. It can now boast a new school and herbal clinic, both of which are free of charge to the poorest townfolk. Jinpo read aloud. Huh. The Te family is not known for generosity. I wonder what's gotten into young Si-hung recently. What indeed? Te Si-hung had been the first official of the Earth Kingdom to learn Kyoshi was the Avatar, right after she decided not to assassinate him during a Dao Fei raid on his house. After her public revealing, she made it clear to Ted that the life debt he owed her still applied, and she'd continue to watch him. Knowing his power didn't make him immune to consequences seemed to have bolstered both his compassion and skill as governor. Good news was hard to come by these days. What's next? She asked Jinpa, hoping for more. His lips pulled to the side. The rest of the letters are audience requests from nobles you've already rejected or ignored. All of them? She eyed the tall stack of papers and frowned. Jinpa shrugged. You reject and ignore a lot of nobles. Earth Kingdom folk are nothing if not persistent. Kyoshi fought the urge to set the whole pile of correspondence ablaze. She didn't have to read every message to know each one was a demand for the Avatar's favorable judgment on matters of business, politics, and money. She'd learned after the first few times. Kyoshi would accept an innocuous invitation to attend a banquet, preside over a spiritual ceremony, bless a new canal or bridge. Inevitably, her host, the governor or the largest landowner, oftentimes the same person, would corner her into a side conversation and beg for assistance in material affairs they would never have. And beg for assistance in material affairs they would never have bothered Karuk or Great Yin Chen with. But Kyoshi was one of their own, wasn't she? She understood how business was done in the Earth Kingdom. She did. It didn't mean she liked it. Sages who vehemently denied her avatarhood despite Jianzu's last will and testament, nobles who claimed trickery after watching her twirl water and earth above her head with her own eyes, suddenly became true believers when they thought she could aid them in biting off great mouths when they thought she could aid them in biting off greater mouthfuls of wealth and power in the endless hierarchies of the Earth Kingdom. The Avatar would settle where the Avatar could settle where a provincial border lay, and which governor got to claim taxes from the rich, and which governor got to claim taxes from a rich cropland. The Avatar could speed a trade fleet. Yeah, the Avatar could speed a trade fleet along its route safely, protecting the lives of the sailors, but ultimately ensuring a massive profit for its merchants and backers. Couldn't she? Kyoshi soon learned to ignore such requests and focus on what she could wreak with her own hands. Those messages could wait, she said. She secretly hoped the stack of correspondence would blow away into dust if she sounded cold and authoritative enough. Junpei gave her a gentle but chiding look. Avatar, if I may be permitted, you have to participate in high society to some extent. You can't keep putting off the leadership of the Earth Kingdom forever. The Earth Kingdom doesn't have leadership, Kyoshi thought. I helped kill the closest thing to a leader it had. The duties of your role extend beyond being a powerful bender, he went on. You've scrubbed the countryside of the largest bandit groups, and it's impressive you were able to track down this mock person and keep him from hurting more innocent people. But at this point, you're running yourself ragged simply so you can beat up the same bad men you've already beaten up in the past. Is scraping the bottom of the criminal barrel truly the most good you could do for the Four Nations? Not to mention the risk it poses to your personal safety. It's what I know. And it's the only way I can be sure what I'm doing is right. They'd had this conversation before, many times, but Junpei never grew tired of reminding her. Unlike the other air nomads she'd met, who'd prized detachment from the world, he was constantly pushing her to engage in a higher level of discourse with the very people who sought to exploit her. He wasn't much older than Kyoshi, slightly on the other side of 20 years, and so it was strange. Yeah, slightly on the other side of 20 years. So it was strange when he spoke like a political tutor trying to guide a wayward pupil. At some point, you will have to stand upon a greater stage, Junpei said. The Avatar creates ripples in the world, whether they mean to or not. Is that a saying among your mysterious friends whom you won't tell me about? She retorted. He merely shrugged at her clumsy attempt to change the subject. That was the other frustrating thing about Junpei. He wouldn't trade jabs with her like Karima or Wong. He showed her too much respect, a problem her old companions never had, even after learning she was the Avatar. She wondered what would happen if the monk ever met the remaining members of the Flying Opera Company. She could imagine Junpei offering them assistance in escaping the Doubtfei lifestyle. They probably would have tried to steal his bison. There was only one thing that could get her to talk to the sages. None of the letters mentioned Master Yoon. Unfortunately, he has yet to turn up. Kyoshi exhaled, a long hiss through her teeth. During the period where the world thought Yoon was the Avatar, he had focused a great deal of effort on treating with the Earth Kingdom's. Hold on. Yeah, during the period where the world thought Yoon was the Avatar, he had focused a great deal of effort on treating the people on treating with the Earth Kingdom's elite, which meant they were the only people who knew his face. Without a lead from someone who recognized him, finding without a lead from someone who recognized him, finding one man in the entirety of the Earth Kingdom was like looking for a single pebble in a gravel pit. Let's try bumping up the reward again. I don't know if that'll help, Jinpa said. The prominent figures of the Earth Kingdom lost a lot of face as a result of Master Yoon's misidentification. If I were them, I wouldn't want him to resurface. I would want to pretend the whole episode never happened. I hear Liu Beifang forbids anyone in his household, guests including, to speak of Jianzhu or his disciple. Jinpa had a strange amount of access to political gossip for a simple air nomad. Yeah, Jinpa had a strange amount of access to political gossip for a simple air nomad. But his observations were usually correct. That blasted Pricklethorn Liu. As Jianzhu's backer, the Beifang patriarch was just as guilty in Kyoshi's eyes for the mistake in identifying the Avatar, and he continued to cast off any further responsibility in the matter. She begged Liu Beifang in person to help her find Yoon, expecting the old man to have some semblance of grandfatherly attachment to him. Instead, Liu coldly revealed that the letter Jianzhu had sent to the sages across the Earth Kingdom, proclaiming Kyoshi to be the Avatar, also said Yoon was dead. Between Jianzhu's final words and Kyoshi's confused testimony of the incident in Jinchao, Liu chose to believe what was most convenient for him. As far as he was concerned, the scandal had resolved itself. A victory for neutral Jing. Jinpa gave her a smile out of sympathy. No one's asking you to give up your search for the false Avatar, but maybe don't call him that! Her rebuke echoed through the room. Thinking about how easily Yoon had been abandoned, first by Jianzhu, then by Liu, and the rest of the Earth Kingdom, had set her back on edge. Jinpa avoided her gaze, lowering his head. In the awkward silence, he wriggled his foot nervously. She didn't need bending to feel the tremors through the floor. I'll send word for Master Yoon's description to every major passport-checking way station I can, he said. It's the job of such officials to match names and appearances. They'll be paying closer attention to your than their God fucking damn it. Let me start again. I'll send word for Master Yoon's description to every major passport-checking way station I can, he said. It's the job of such officials to match names and appearances. They'll be paying closer attention than your average bystander. It was a good idea. Better than any she'd had so far. She felt doubly bad for losing her temper. She needed to apologize for her outburst. She needed to stop having such outbursts if she and Jinpa were to ever shorten the distance between them. But she was fearful of what lay at the end of friendships. She had been a danger to every companion she ever had. And she still couldn't make the memories of the air nomad who gave her jokes and warmth and easy smiles. Yeah, and she couldn't shake the memories of an air nomad who gave her jokes and warmth and easy smiles. Make it happen, Kyoshi said curtly. Junpei nodded. Then he paused, as if wondering how to frame his next statement. I didn't open all of today's letters. One of them came by a special courier. Half the letters we get are by special courier. Half of the half of the letters we get are by special courier. Kyoshi scoffed. Yeah, grandiose, I'm gonna just say, grandiose deliveries with envelopes stamped with urgent and for the avid and for av and grandiose deliveries with envelopes stamped with urgent and for the Avatar's eyes only were loud green ink were common tricks the Earth sages tried in order to grab her attention. This one is genuinely special. Jinpo reached in his robe and pulled out a message tube he'd been safekeeping. It was red. The sturdy metal tube was end capped with gilded flames. In the surroundings of the stayed but clearly Earth Kingdom furnishing. Okay, yeah. In the surroundings of the stayed but clearly Earth Kingdom furnished. Furnishings of the apartment. The scroll case looked like an ember in a forest, threatening to catch. An army of wax seals guarded the seams. Junpei passed it to her with both hands, like an object of reverence. I believe this is from Fire Lord Zoryu himself. Her first direct correspondence from a head of state. Kyoshi had never met the Fire Lord, nor had he ever written her before. The only contact she had with the Fire Nation government was the envoy who'd visited her. Sorry. Oh, we're at the end of the chapter. Okay. Bear with me. Okay. The only contact she'd had with the Fire Nation government was the envoy who'd visited her in Yokoya soon after the news broke of her avatarhood. The sharply dressed minister had watched her raise a modicum of all four elements, nodding to himself as each one was checked off in turn. He'd saluted Kyoshi, politely stayed for dinner, and then left for his homeland the next morning to report the new state of affairs. She remembered appreciating the lack of grief the foreign nation. Hold on. She remembered appreciating the lack of grief the foreign delegate gave her in comparison to her own countrymen. Breaking the seals and opening the case felt like damaging a historical artifact. Kyoshi kept as much of the wax's original shape as she could and unfurled the scroll inside. The writing was direct and to the point, devoid of the flourishes Earth Kingdom officials thought were necessary to curry favor with her. Lord Zoryu needed the Avatar's assistance on a matter of national importance. if she would come visit the royal palace as his honored guest to celebrate the upcoming festival of Zetzo. Of Zetto. Yeah, of Zetto. Yeah, if she would come visit the royal palace as his honored guest to celebrate the upcoming festival of Zetto, a significant holiday in the Fire Islands. He could explain further in person. What does it say? Jinpa asked. It's an invitation. It's an invitation to visit the Fire Nation. A debut on the world stage. She swallowed the nervousness that had suddenly clung to her throat. Jinpa saw her hesitation and clasped his hands together, beseeching. This is exactly what I'm talking about, Avatar. The Four Nations aren't going to let you remain out of the public eye forever. Yeah, the Four Nations aren't going to let you remain out of the public eye forever. Please don't tell me you'd snub the Fire Lord of all people. Kyoshi mulled it over. She doubted the ruler of the Fire Nation She doubted the ruler of the Fire Nation would waste her time with a frivolous request for help. Let me say it again. Yeah, she doubted the ruler of the Fire Nation would waste her time with a frivolous request for help, and her frustrations with her own country were threatening to push her past her breaking point. A change of scenery might be called for. And it's a holiday festival, Jinpa added. You might even have fun. You are allowed to enjoy yourself from time to time. You are allowed to enjoy yourself from time to time, you know. Leave it to an air nomad to fall back on fun as the last argument. You can write back and tell the Fire Lord I am honored to accept his invitation, she said. We'll start planning the trip tomorrow. I don't think I can handle any more business for today. Jinpa bowed solemnly, hiding his satisfaction that finally the Avatar was stepping up to her responsibilities. No one needs their rest more than the Avatar. He left the room for the office they set up down the hall. Alone, Kyoshi stared at the cream-colored paper in silence. She hadn't mentioned to Jinpa the portion of the letter that tipped the scales in favor of the visit. It was a very specific piece of news at the end of the Fire Lord's message. The former headmistress of the Royal Academy had returned home after a long convalescence in Agna-Kella, the capital of the Northern Water Tribe. So had her daughter. Perhaps the Avatar would like to see them. Given the three had been acquaintances since Yokia. They certainly wished to see her acquaintances. Kyoshi didn't know it was possible to feel such relief and distress at once. She wasn't in the Fire Nation yet, and already she could picture who was waiting for her. The walking blaze of pure heat and confrontation. In the darkness of her exhaustion, a point of shining light beckoned. Rangi. Kyoshi carefully folded the paper and tucked it into her robes, close to her thumping heart. Despite her secretary's wishes, she was not going to get. Despite her secretary's best. It's not best wishes. Why am I saying best? Despite her secretary's wishes, she was not going to be getting much sleep tonight. Damn Kyoshi. And is the end of that chapter. Okay. Okay, there we go. And that is where I stop here for tonight. I read a good chunk. God, this is a nice book. It's red and I like it. Oh, God. Okay. My hand's still really, like, flary. Okay. Well, I will be seeing you guys soon. Bye-bye.